Megan Kerrigan, the soon-to-be ex-wife of astronomer CEO Andy Byron, has just made headlines by revealing new details regarding her awareness of the now viral Coldplay kiss cam affair. She first took to social media to share a heartbreaking post where she said she, quote, wouldn't be able to survive this, and shared the trauma she has had since the incident. Since then, she has gone from depressed and heartbroken to full-blown nuclear mode on Andy Byron. Today, we go over the bombshell details she has revealed, as well as the latest status of her separation from Andy Byron. Immediately following the infamous moment at the Coldplay concert Kiss Cam, two apologies appeared online, one teary, one smug, and the internet couldn't decide which was real, only which was juicier. Then the quiet move that changed everything. His wife, Megan Kerrigan, dropped the last name and vanished from socials without a word. That silence hit harder than any PR script, and just when the frenzy peaked, a new player stepped onto the board, Andrew Cabot, Kristen's billionaire husband. Lawyers assembled, calls placed, leverage loaded. This wasn't gossip anymore, it was a power play. Tonight, we unpack the receipts, the boardroom panic, and how one 30-second Zoom turned into a multi-million-dollar reckoning, and why Andrew's next move might be the most devastating of all. The camera lands on Andy Byron and Kristen Cabot for a simple crowd gag, and the mood flips in a heartbeat. His arm slides across her shoulders like second nature. Her smile stalls, then returns a beat too late. The crowd does what crowds do. Cheer first, judge second. Phones rise as if rehearsed. 10 seconds of grainy zoom turns into 1,000 angles, each one closer, each one bolder. In the concourse, you can hear it. Did you see that? As clips hop from airdrop to group chats to timelines at breakneck speed. It doesn't look like a prank. It looks practiced. The replay loops tell their own story. The glance, the lean, the flinch, the half-laugh that reads more like a cover. Within minutes, captions get spicy and hashtags start breeding. Comment sections split into camps, innocent versus obvious. By the time the band hits its next chorus, the narrative has left the building. The moment is viral, and so is the suspicion. But a 10-second clip is only the spark. The real fire starts when the statements hit. Hours after the clip, two posts surface under Andy Byron's name, and they couldn't be more opposite. The first reads like a corporate confessional. Careful punctuation, therapy words, a borrowed lyric about fixing what's broken. The second is a flex, snarky, petty, almost daring people to be mad. Screenshots swarm. Reaction channels read both in solemn tones. Duets declare one the real one, and the other a troll. Then the pendulum flips. Blue checks, confirm, only to walk it back. Nobody waits for headers or provenance. Vibes pass for proof because they arrive first. Digital sleuths zoom in on the tells, how one post uses British spellings, how the other repeats a comma quirk, how both accounts share an identical banner crop. Clone, someone says. Sock puppet, someone else counters. Meanwhile, the algorithm rewards the loudest certainty, not the quietest accuracy. Correction threads crawl, outrage sprints. 1,000 hot takes later, the truth is buried under engagement. And while the internet argues over commas and capital letters, one person makes the only move that actually changes the story. Megan Kerrigan drops a surname and disappears, and with that single click, the narrative stops being hypothetical. It gets personal. Next comes the silence that says more than any apology ever could. While timelines argue over which apology is real, Megan Kerrigan moves with razor precision. One moment her profiles read, Megan Byron. The next, the surname is gone. No caption, no cryptic emoji, just a clean cut that says everything. Then the bio wipes. Then the accounts vanish. Facebook first, Instagram next, like doors closing softly in a quiet house. The internet, addicted to oversharing, hears the silence louder than any statement. Sympathy pivots fast. Hashtags flip from popcorn to protection. Hashtags stand with Megan. Hashtag receipt season. In DMs and group chats, people whisper what the public already senses. This wasn't a shock. It was a confirmation. Her move reframes the entire story. Not rumor, not hot takes, but collateral. And when a spouse goes dark, the next thing to light up is usually evidence. Which is exactly what hits the feeds next. Because the moment her name disappears, the breadcrumbs start to appear. And they don't care about vibes. They're time-stamped, they're specific, and they're about to turn a viral clip into a credibility crisis. But that wasn't the whole story. The first receipt isn't a smoking gun, it's a spreadsheet. Anonymous, grainy, time-stamped at 2:17 a.m. It maps rideshare pickups from the arena to an address 2 blocks from Kristen Cabot's building, then lines them against Andy Byron's calendar gaps during a so-called client mixer. A note in the margin reads, "Same driver, 2 Saturdays in a row." Minutes later, a second sheet appears. Hotel folios labeled "Client Hosting," filed on weekends, billed to a corporate card that normally only covers weekday events. The amounts are small enough to look boring, but the pattern is tidy. Check-ins after evening keynotes, checkouts before morning stand-ups. Commenters overlay the folios with conference schedules and find a quiet 3-hour blackout that repeats like a metronome. Then come the DMs, cropped screenshots of late-night Slack pings that sound harmless until you read them in sequence. Long day, need to de-stress, Suite 714 again? No names in the frames, just initials and timestamps, but the cadence matches the folios. Someone put sleuths get bolder. They stitch LinkedIn travel selfies with airport Wi-Fi check-ins, matching background art in a lounge photo to a boutique hotel where the folios were issued. They freeze-frame a keynote live stream and spot the same wristband color as the private access section on the receipt header. A rideshare map shows a detour past the arena after the encore. Wrong turn, defenders say, yet the tip note says, "Thanks for waiting." Every thread ends the same way, a tidy loop that returns to the moment on the big screen and asks, coincidence or choreography? Inside Astronomer, the policy questions start to bite. HR is the firewall, Kristen is HR. If there's an undisclosed relationship, every performance review and comp decision touching her org now sits under a blacklight. People dig up a training deck slide, boundaries protect everyone, and meme it into oblivion. A whistleblower claims exit interview notes flagged favor currents months ago. Another posts a blurry photo of a whiteboard titled Q3 Refresh, with COI circled twice, conflict of interest, followed by 3 red question marks. It's all alleged, all messy, and all devastating to trust. When receipts pile up, brands don't just face gossip, they face mechanics. Auditors, insurers, and outside counsel care less about drama and more about disclosures, approvals, and who signed what. The internet might chase the kiss cam, but the real fallout lives in spreadsheets and boilerplate. And if the firewall is in the frame, the next chapter writes itself. Governance goes from background noise to siren. But the firewall wasn't the only pressure point. A billionaire just decided he's part of the story, and his playbook is not subtle. Inside Astronomer Analytics, the silence cracks first. Private channels rename themselves with gallows humor. Calendar invites switch from all hands to emergency all hands, and a pinned message appears in the company-wide chat. Reminder, code of conduct applies to everyone. Anonymous forms light up with long-shelved complaints. A doc titled Boundaries 101 recirculates, annotated in real time with brutal margin notes. By lunchtime, HR office hours are standing room only, except HR is the story, so nobody trusts the room. Morale slides from confused to combustible in a single refresh. The board retreats into a legal bunker. Outside counsel is looped in, audit chairs start asking for paper trails, and an independent review lines up interview lists longer than a release schedule. Finance freezes discretionary spend, procurement halts new vendor approvals. The crisis comms firm arrives with templated statements and a smile that says, billable hours. Meanwhile, clients do not wait for press releases. Enterprise accounts demand to know who approved access controls, who handled incident reports, and whether performance reviews touching Kristen Cabot's org were insulated from bias. Sales teams stall renewals with, "We'll circle back," while competitors quietly message, "Rough week? We're hiring." Then comes the investor call, 5 minutes of scripted calm, 30 minutes of open-line turbulence. Questions hit like hail. Governance, disclosures, key man risk, contingency. Recruiters swarm LinkedIn as status updates flicker to open to work. An internal Q&A meant to soothe turns into a ledger of accountability. Will reviews be rerun? Who investigates HR when HR is compromised? Were any raises tied to undisclosed relationships? The interim leadership rumor mill kicks to life, but the room wants consequences, not placeholders. And just as pressure crests, another force steps in from outside the building, wealthy, well-connected, and personally invested. Andrew Cabot has been quiet. He's about to change that. For 48 hours, Andrew Cabot says nothing. Then the air changes. A crisis war room lights up in a private office tower. Lawyers, investigators, a media strategist who talks in timelines. Phones start ringing in concentric circles. Boards he sits on, funds he anchors, founders who owe him favors. The message is simple and cold. Contain the blast radius, define the narrative, and make anyone pushing half-truths feel the cost. First move, information lockdown. NDAs get enforced with teeth. Private investigators trace the origin of the dueling apologies, scanning burner accounts, cloud backups, and payment trails. A narrow briefing memo leaks, not an accusation, a posture. It frames Kristen Cabot as compromised by proximity and Andy Byron as reckless, without spelling anything actionable. It also hints at material conflicts that any prudent board would be duty-bound to review. Lawyers don't shout, they underline. Second move, capital pressure. Andrew pauses 2 term sheets and lets word drift through back channels that governance is his red line. Venture groups that rely on his co-invests start asking Astronomer hard questions. A strategic partner reassesses exposure. A lender updates risk models. None of it looks like revenge. It looks like finance doing what finance does. But the timing is not an accident. Third move, narrative shaping. A profile of Andrew appears in a glossy business outlet, pre-written, now perfectly timed, positioning him as the adult in the room, decisive, principled, allergic to mess. A separate piece highlights the cost of undisclosed relationships in high-growth companies. Neither article names names. Everyone recognizes the silhouettes. The meme accounts keep joking. The money reads footnotes. Inside Astronomer, the effect is instant. Directors fear a capital chill more than a trending hashtag. An emergency session widens the scope of the independent review. Compensation committees revisit every decision touching Kristen's org. A quiet outreach begins. What would it take for Andrew to unpause? He doesn't send demands. He sends. By the end of the week, a pattern is plain. Andrew didn't swing wildly. He tightened valves, legal, financial, reputational, until choices narrowed to one lane, accountability. He doesn't have to say a word about his marriage. His moves say it for him. And as the pressure hits, the culture turns from rumor to reckoning. But the internet doesn't ease up. It accelerates, because late-night comedy just found its favorite new target. Humor gets there first. Hashtags mutate by the hour. Hashtag KissCamGate, hashtag HRomance, hashtag receipt season. 10-second clips loop the shoulder wrap, the delayed smile, the flinch. Creators add captions, freeze frames, laser pointers. Someone auto-tunes the awkward laugh into a chorus. Another splices a team-building stock video over the hug and titles it Mandatory Training. The sound becomes a trend. Thousands of remixes later, the joke has muscle memory. Then the late-night monologues land. One riff calls Astronomer the only company where HR stands for hug readiness. Another rewrites breakup emails using corporate jargon. Per our last conversation, please return my dignity. A parody compliance quiz goes viral. Q1. Disclose conflicts or duet them at a stadium. The punchlines do what they always do, turn facts into folklore. Viewers don't remember bullet points. They remember the bit that made them choke laugh. Merch makers smell blood. Mugs read, fix you, fix policy. Hoodies print a pixelated freeze frame with algorithm error underneath. A sticker packs the whole saga into a QR code that opens a meme compilation. Even Andrew Cabot becomes a character. Clips of elevator doors closing over the subtitle, "He does not speak, he moves markets." The richer the target, the sharper the satire. His silence reads as strategy. The timeline treats it like a trailer. Brand accounts try to be cute and get roasted. A competitor posts, "We value boundaries." Top comment replies, "Spell check, benefits." HR influencers do sober explainers that rack up views but not laughs. The jokes, not the memos, harden perception. When humor sticks, statements bounce. And once the bit becomes the story, the next step isn't debate, it's consequences. Which is exactly where this is headed. Because after the laughs fade, the reckoning arrives. By midweek, the press release lands like a gavel. Andy Byron steps down effective immediately. No warm thanks, no soft focus farewell, just a line about continuity and a promise of independent review. Kristen Cabot is placed on leave pending that review, lawyer language for everything is now evidence. Astronomer names an interim chief who speaks in bullet points and risk matrices. The calendars fill. Audit interviews, governance briefings, outside counsel prep. The tone shifts from denial to documentation. Staff file into an all-hands that feels more like a deposition. The first question isn't about product, it's about trust. Will performance reviews tied to Kristen's org be rerun? Will comp decisions be re-examined? Who signs off when the firewall is the subject? Answers come measured and bloodless, and that's the point. No spin, just process. HR inboxes flood with requests to reopen old cases. Compliance turns on record everything mode. The company that sold dashboards now lives inside one. Customers don't wait. A few pause renewals. One asks for a governance addendum. Another wants assurances in writing that conflicts are disclosed and mitigated. Procurement hates surprises. Legal hates ambiguity. Finance hates churn. The interim team triages with checklists and calm voices. A new head of people, external, independent, arrives on contract, armed with a hotline and a mandate. The mood is not vengeance. It's vacuuming glass off the floor. Meanwhile, Andrew Cabot stays off camera and fully present. Meetings happen in quiet rooms with thick doors. A path forward materializes not as demands, but as a shape. Independent oversight, repapered policies, clear distance between authority and influence. Capital loosens when governance tightens. That's the trade. Andrew doesn't need a speech. His calendar does the talking. Outside, the meme cycle slows, replaced by explainer threads and what this means breakdowns. Inside, consequences harden into structure. Updated COI disclosures, retrained managers, promotion audits, a new rule that anything that looks like a gray area is treated like a red one. People breathe a little easier, not because it's fixed, but because the guardrails are visible. And yet, the original spark still hums under the surface, a 30-second zoom that upended a company and rewrote a marriage. Megan Kerrigan remains silent, which reads louder than any post. Andy is gone from org charts. Kristen waits on findings. Astronomer rebuilds in daylight. The scandal has moved from gossip to governance, from clips to clauses. The internet got its show. The paperwork writes the ending. But before we close the book, there's one last question worth asking, and it rewires how we think about power, privacy, and proof. A joke on a jumbotron became a stress test for power. A 10-second clip torched a polished persona. A spouse's quiet erasure reset the narrative, and a billionaire's cold precision moves tightened every valve until consequences clicked into place. The memes made it memorable. The receipts made it undeniable. And in the end, Astronomer learned what every modern brand eventually learns. Virality writes the draft, but governance writes the verdict. Tap subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your take. Who actually controlled this story? The crowd, the cash, or the claims? Because the next viral moment is already buffering, and we'll be there when the timeline turns.